Welcome everybody and welcome to URC Youth Trialogue. My name's Tom Hackett and I'm your host for this evening, and I'm joined as always by three panellists who I'm going to invite now to introduce themselves to you. So we'll start with Emily, please.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm from Wessex, specifically Poole, and I'm the convener of the Wessex Synod Youth Executive.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Kevin. I'm also from Wessex, down the road from Emily, and I've been working in various roles in mental health for the last 35 years, and I'm about to start ministerial training in September.
Okay, thanks Kevin. And Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz, originally from South London, and currently working as a lay minister assistant in an Anglican parish in Nottingham.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to all of you and thank you for being part of tonight's conversation. And also welcome to all of our viewers who are watching as well, whether live tonight or at a later date. This is your programme as viewers and we really want to hear from you as well. So you can get involved by sending in your thoughts and questions for the panellists during tonight's programme. And the details of how you can do that are on your screen. You can do it through the Slido facility. So please do get involved. This evening is a space to explore together and a space to learn from each other and to have a conversation. We hope that you'll be encouraged and challenged by the conversation that we have this evening. And we're discussing a really important topic around mental health and well-being. This is something that, as URC Youth, we've long been advocates around speaking out about mental health and about challenging the stigma that is so often attached to mental health, to mental ill health. And in 2014, URC Youth signed the Time to Change pledge, making the commitment to tackle discrimination around mental illness and to look to change the way in which we speak about mental health. So it's a really important topic that we are having this evening. But we also need to give a content warning as well that as we are discussing mental health and well-being, this episode will also include feature discussions around mental illness, and that the passage that we're exploring tonight as well also touches on the issue of suicidal thoughts. So please be aware in this episode. And if you or someone you know is experiencing poor mental health, support is available. And please have a look at the links which we've included underneath this video on YouTube. We've got links to helplines, phone lines, text lines, and also organisations like Young Minds, where you are able to access support as well. So before we start, we're going to have a time of prayer. So let us pray. Dear Lord, we give thanks that we're able to meet this evening and give thanks for the technology that enables us to join, even though we're apart, that we can be together and have this conversation. We pray that you will guide us in your conversation, that your spirit will be with us as we explore your word and its meaning for our lives. We pray that through our conversations on the issue of mental health and well-being, that we'll begin to challenge the stigma and break down the stigma attached to these issues. And we also pray for anyone who is impacted by poor mental health and pray that you will be able to provide the support that is needed for those people. Amen. Okay, thank you. So before we get on tonight, we will be discussing the passage 1 Kings 19. So I will give a short introduction to this passage before we have our first question. So 1 Kings 19 starts with Elijah when he flees from Horeb. So it starts with Queen Jezebel threatening to kill Elijah, and he is afraid and he runs for his life and goes out into the wilderness. Elijah then prays to God and asks God to take his life. He asks for his life to be ended. Then he feels he's touched by an angel and has messages, the angel giving messages for him to get up to eat. He's provided with food and water and the things that he needs, and takes rest. And then after he's rested, he travels for 40 days into the mountains of Horeb, which is a holy mountain. The second part of the story is about the Lord appearing to Elijah. So he hears the words and the Lord asking him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And then he is in the mountains and he hears there's powerful winds, there's earthquakes, there's fire, there's lots of things that are happening. But then it is through a whisper that he hears the Lord again asking that same message in a gentle whisper, "What are you doing here?" And we hear at the end of the passage that the Lord speaks to Elijah and he gives him a message to go back to where he came from, to go back to Damascus and to anoint several different kings. So he gives him a task to go away with as well. So we'll be exploring this passage and how it relates to mental health, and that's the discussion that we'll be having this evening. So our panelists have been given a few questions to get started, but we also want to hear your questions, which you can submit via Slido. But the first question is around what is the most important parts of the passage for you in relation to mental health and well-being. So I would like to invite Liz to share her thoughts on that question, please.
I think the thing that really struck me was when the angel sort of goes to Elijah and says, "Get up and eat," but he like touches Elijah on the head and like kind of like feeds him bread and water and stuff. And there's just something really caring and really attentive about that kind of action. It's very gentle, and I suppose in terms of mental health, it's that attention to the needs of the person, you know, and seeing them as a whole person in need of kind of material, you know, comforts as well as just kind of words and so on. That was the thing that really struck me and stood out for me.
Okay, thanks, Liz. And Kevin, would you like to share your thoughts?
I guess I would echo everything that Liz has said so far. And yeah, this is a long time ago, this passage, but the thing about being human is the same today as it was yesterday. And, you know, sometimes life can be so much of a challenge that we just feel we can't cope. And the only way out is to end it all. And that's not what God wanted. Now, as you go through the passage, this prophet had a special relationship with God, but God wasn't going to answer that prayer. But God was there in the eating, the sleeping, and the resting. And sometimes when we feel low or sick, we worry, we can't switch off, we go off food. And it's a real effort to eat, but never underestimate the importance of sleep. A bit of exercise. I mean, I don't mean going to the gym and pushing iron, a bit of exercise, a walk, and rest on our mental health. And, you know, sometimes we might actually feel God is talking to us and God is there for us. And Tom said they're in the whisper. The important thing is that the whisper was affirming. And if we hear a whisper, if we hear a voice, some translations say silence, check it out with people we trust in our church, etc. Because if we hear whispers that go on and on and on and on, or pushing us down, that's probably not God. But if we hear something affirmative or something affirmative on our hearts, you know what, a minister, an elder, somebody in the youth executive, somebody we trust, somebody from Synod will know exactly what we're talking about. So there's loads. I could pull out loads there, but they're the main things.
Thanks, Kevin. And Emily.
I agree. It's the angel bit really stood out to me. Mostly the get up and eat bit, because sometimes when you are down, you do forget to get up and eat. And everyone needs an angel. And I've got angels in my life that have sort of been like, right, let's go. We're going to go get something to eat, even if it's sort of junk food. It's something to get inside you. And going to the beach, I have a friend that always takes me to the beach. And yeah, it's just the importance of having an angel in your life, whether that be family, friend, even angels at work who look after you.
Yeah, great, thank you. I think, yeah, both Kevin saying about the affirmative whisper and then the people who can support you as well, knowing that there's support out there. Is there anyone, having heard the other thoughts, are there any other things that people picked up or things that stood out from the responses you just heard?
I like.
Go ahead, Emily.
I was going to say the whisper bit. Yeah, I hadn't actually thought about it until Kevin just said it. But yeah, you definitely do have these little whispers that sort of travel through, and sometimes that whisper comes from the most unexpected people as well.
Yeah.
I think is amazing.
Yeah. There's also something else to me about God in nature. And, you know, nature always speaks of God's vastness, but actually God doesn't communicate to us through violent acts of nature. You know, it was there in the silence. It was there in the small whisper. It was there in the small wind, not the gale, not the... Now, there's other places where it talks about God's breath throughout the Bible, but here it's really clear. It's silent and gentle. Tying on what Liz and Emily said about, you know, that gentleness of God, that nurture. Really nice image, really.
What's interesting about the nurture for me though is that it's like there's a little bit of like tough love there as well. Like in like a very caring way. You know, it's like, come on, get up, eat. You've got to take care of yourself. And I think that, like, I know that when I've been sort of struggling with poor mental health, a lot of the things that you need to do in order to get better and to kind of heal or recover or whatever are not actually the easiest things. You know, it might be seeing a doctor, that might be getting in a better sleeping pattern, that might be, you know, talking to people and pulling out some commitments for a time, and all of those things can be really, really hard. But that, you know, we have to sort of fight the impulse, I suppose, to do the easy thing, which is often just kind of like curl up in bed and not eat, and, you know, all of that kind of thing. And so, you know, those angels that you spoke about, Emily, sometimes they ask us to do things that are hard, but that also are necessary.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, actually. You know, my best friends are the people that I'm happy to accept the most critical feedback from. And it's never critical to say to somebody, you know, are you okay? Are you struggling? Do you want to talk? Have you thought to see your GP? But, you know, it's the real friends who will find a way and persevere and give space for a difficult conversation if they see somebody struggling. You know, fair weather friends often kind of say what they think people want to hear. So, you know, that thing about that tough love.
And it's important, I think, to like know how to be that person for somebody also, and to kind of, it takes a lot of love and like quite a lot of courage sometimes to say the things to somebody that you think that they need to hear instead of what they want to hear. And you have to be prepared to take that risk sometimes, I think.
And sometimes to actually think about it beforehand. You know, we talk about prayer, but thinking about it through and working it through, and maybe going for a walk and thinking, you know, how do I say this to my mate? How do I say this to my friends? You know, maybe that's something that we do as Christian friends that other friends don't do. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Just a reminder for those that are watching, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the passage as well. What stood out for you? What was important for you in this passage? So send in your comments via Slido. And if you have any questions that might have been raised from the passage or in general on the topic of mental health and well-being, please do send them in, so that we want this to be led by you, the viewers. So we will move on to the second question, which was about what were the challenging things in the passage? So what was the most challenging or difficult parts of the passage for you? Who would like to go first on that question? Kevin, would you like to?
Yeah, I kind of guess I struggle with, I love these great Hebrew texts, Old Testament prophets, but he was zealous before the Lord and had killed all the prophets of Baal. I found, I sometimes find Old Testament violence difficult, and of course, he was led by what he believed God was telling him to do. But of course, we are moved on. We are, the whole of the Bible, it has important messages for us, but we live in a post-Easter age, and we also have, Jesus and the message of love. So, the violence, that just was the precursor, if you like, of the chapter, always makes me go a bit ouch. But in its context, we've got to remember it's an historical context.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. And Emily?
I'm sort of the same. It's the Old Testament violence that I always struggle to get my head around, especially sort of just over halfway through this one, where God says, if they escape this being killed by this person, they're going to be killed by this person. But if they escape that, they're then going to be killed by this person. And I've always sort of had this struggle of thinking, well, if God is all loving and knowing and forgiving and all of that, why does he want to kill all these people? I always struggled with the death in the Bible, because why would anyone want anyone else dead?
Okay, thanks, Emily. Liz, do you have any thoughts to add?
Yeah, the part that I really struggled with was kind of just how long Elijah was made to wait before he got kind of like healing and like restoration. And it's easy enough to say that it's all in God's time, and to some extent that's true. But I think the thing about depression and stuff like that is it kind of feels like suffering without a purpose, especially when you're in the midst of it. And that makes me really wary of saying, oh, it's okay because God heals him in God's time, because that feels like a bit of a cop-out. And I think, we know that God is all loving and all kind and all of that, but it feels almost a little bit cruel, to make Elijah kind of walk 40 days and then only to come in the sort of in the third breath of wind and all of that kind of stuff. And I don't know, it made me think as well about all of the barriers that there are these days to accessing mental health treatment, and
yes,
the social stigmas around it, even unfortunately stigma in the medical profession sometimes, and how it feels like a lot of people go on kind of struggling far beyond like what they needed to, just because they're not able to, for whatever reason, to get access to the help that they need.
Okay, thank you. We've had a few comments started to come in from the viewers, so thank you for those who have sent it in. One of them is to do with the comment on the Bible passage. So they've said, I think the bit where God tells Elijah to go back with tasks, so towards the end of the passage, is like God helping him find a realistic strategy for dealing with his issues, rather than coming up with his own unachievable plans. And they say that when they feel overwhelmed, that they need that too. So yeah, God giving him a strategy, and that he has a purpose as well. God is giving him a purpose to as well. So thank you for sharing those comments as well.
In mental health speak, we often talk about people who are struggling with their mood, having loss of drive, and actually that's exactly what it means. loss of purpose. So that's really insightful, that, you know, to put that out for the passage. And I've got to say, I missed that. So that's kind of, you know, thank you for that. I should look at that and ponder on that.
Thank you. We've also had a question in which tax when we were just touching there about some of the stigma that can be around mental health. So these ask a question. I wonder if any of you have any thoughts on this one. Feel free to share if you do. But they ask, what should we say to Christians who say that mental health comes from demons and that it is our own fault if we have mental illness? Does anyone have any thoughts about what we might say and how we might challenge, look at how to address the stigma that can be around it?
I've got to say, since I've worked in mental health, the stigma is getting better, but as a society, we've still got a long way to go. And the shame of our under-resourced mental health services is a real shame in our society. Christians come from a whole variety of interpretations, but I'd be really challenging and asking questions then, how many good, honest Christian people do we know who have challenged and had challenges with their emotions, with their mood? Would we say the same today about physical illnesses? And we need to acknowledge that demons and such like was often the historical understanding. Today we know so much more about psychology, sociology, the biology of the brain, the structure of the brain, and actually that view doesn't really hold up. And for us in the Reformed tradition, we value reason, we value scripture, and we value the discernment of our community. And for me, what I see in scripture, for me, what I see in science and the social sciences and the discernment of our community doesn't talk about demons. It talks about a human life challenge, which at the moment is called an illness, but it's a human life challenge and needs help and love and understanding and passion.
Thanks, Kevin.
And if either of you have got anything to add.
Okay. I think you summed it up really well. Yeah, the way times have changed. Back then, yeah, it was easy just to blame it on the demons, or that it must be that. No, an explanation. Obviously now with the science, and we know about the chemical imbalances and other stuff in society that can affect mental health. It's not always just the imbalance, but often there can be a cause.
Yes.
I think we covered it really well, that actually it is just a time thing, and you know, who knows, the meaning or the cause of mental health might change again in the future. We never know.
It's changing all the time.
I think the more that we can talk about these things in our communities, the better. And you know, for those of us who've had challenges, obviously no one should be under any obligation to share their experiences, but for those who feel that who want to, I think that's really great, because it kind of just normalizes it. And I think a lot of the problems come when people don't realize how common it is, you know, and that actually it's a very ordinary part of kind of many people's lives. And I think the more that you can do to sort of normalize it in some ways, not in a way that you sort of say that it's okay, but just say that this happens to lots of people, and kind of create an ongoing conversation that helps everybody, I think.
And mental health problems are common, and they affect us all, and they are ordinary people like you and I. And I know the research is a bit out of date, and I'm sure there's more recent research, but they used to say 1 in 4, 25% of any GP's list up and down the country in the UK and across all the developed world would be around a mental health issue. And they used to say that 3 in 10 of us at any point is experiencing some mental health problems, and that's from the very mild to the very severe, because that's the other thing. There's a whole continuum in this, from being very mild and struggling a little bit to struggling a lot, but it's common. It's everyday stuff.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks for all those who have sent in those questions, and please do keep sending in your comments and questions. So we've talked, we've talked about some of the challenges in the thing, or we've spoken about when we may be having difficulties with our mental health, where we could have poor mental health. But also, if we think about all of us having mental health, and that we can have good mental health and also bad, just like our physical health, we could be when we can be healthy, and sometimes we can be, and we may not have times when we are not as healthy. Mental health would be like that. So it being, as you said, the spectrum. So one of these questions does relate to that. So what do the panelists do to help their mental health, and what are their coping methods if they're dealing with poor mental health, and what are the things that they do to get to help their mental health? Emily, do you have anything to share on that one?
Yeah, so I do a couple of things to sort of help me every day, but most days. The simplest and first one that I like to do is I always make a list of things that I want to do that day. So the first one will always be wake up, great, I've done something today, I can tick that off, amazing. Next one, go get a drink. Amazing, I'm on a roll today. And it's sort of starting that list off really easy and very achievable things, just to get the ball rolling. And then I might move on to, I'll tidy my room, I'll go do the washing up, sort of doing those little things to get up to the bigger things that need to be done. I find that really helps most of the days. And also I've found that during lockdown especially, being creative and actually doing something. So I bought a load of watercolor stuff, and I'm never really an artist, but doing something creative occupies my mind, and it gives me something to physically do as well. And then at the end of it, I have something physical to show through all this effort that I put into something. And it's, it's a little bit of pride. I still feel like a little 5-year-old sometimes, running downstairs to show my mum, like, look what I did, I've painted a face. And it's, that's what I do, lists and creative things.
Okay, thanks, Emily. And yeah, I think everyone has different coping methods, coping strategies that are helpful for them. So I wonder, Liz, have you got anything that you find useful as a coping strategy?
I mean, I'd echo a lot of what Emily said in like slightly different ways, but but I think keeping a routine and all that kind of stuff is, or eating, sleeping, like going out the house, like talking to friends, all of that stuff helps. I think as well, the other thing that's really helped me more recently, and I think I would say that I'm probably, well, this works more when you're kind of out of the worst of it, but it's like really having insight into your own like patterns. So I know that for me, I experience things quite intensely, but actually if I just kind of write it out and stay calm, even in the midst of like some quite bad feelings, it's okay, you come out the other side. And I think that one of the things that really helps is if you can kind of take a look at yourself, as much as possible, and not feeling well mentally can make that quite hard, but just understand what's going on, and you can kind of it makes it a bit easier to understand, and to also know that whatever's happening in the moment is not what it's going to be like forever. and I know that helps me a lot. Yeah, especially more recently. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, yeah, it definitely does. Thanks for sharing these. Kevin, do you have anything to add on?
Yeah, I suppose I'm kind of, I mean, I'm going to share that my colleagues and myself often laugh that actually the people in mental health often follow the worst habits of good mental health. Firstly, it's a myth that you think, if anybody thinks that if you work in mental health, you've got all this right, because most of us haven't, many of us haven't. I kind of guess for me, it's really interesting that I'm at my mentally most healthy when I'm at my spiritually most healthy. And actually, I'm at my spiritually most healthy when I spend some time just to sit and be and take a deep breath and just, you know, I don't sit and meditate for a long time. It just might be a few moments, and I think about God, or I pray, or I think about what's happened. Or I go for a walk and just think, and I'm open to God. And actually, that's when I'm spiritually my most healthy, when I make sure I follow that discipline. And actually, mentally, I'm at my most healthy when I follow that discipline. And, you know, I'm really lucky where we are in Wessex. We've got loads of beautiful country and seascapes nearby. But there's always God in nature. There's always somewhere we can just sit and be just for a few moments.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the viewer who sent that question in. But to the viewers as well, I think I'd also offer that question out as something for the viewers to think about. What are your coping mechanisms? What are the things that you find helpful to help with your mental health? And how can you make time and plan that in so that you can do more of those things that help your mental health? We've had some more thoughts and comments in. So one question we've had is going back to the passage as well. So it says that in the passage, food and rest were enough for Elijah. So he slept, he was given bread and water. So food and rest were enough for Elijah. But what should we do when that's not enough? If anyone's got any thoughts, what should we do when food and rest are not enough?
It's sometimes difficult to ask for help, but if there is difficulty with our mood going on for some time, find a way to share with somebody we trust. When I said earlier, 1 in 4 consultations with a GP is around mental health problems. Your GP is not going to be shocked, surprised, or think you're silly about anything you say. Perhaps there's a school counsellor, school nurse, a youth officer, minister, elder, mum, dad, big sister, big brother, best mate. Find someone to talk to. And actually, if it's too embarrassing to talk to a professional, mental health professional, ask them to come along and support you. There's also all the stuff that Tom's mentioned, Young Minds, Samaritans, all those links. You can chat online, you can phone, lots of ways of making contact. But it's really difficult because stepping out and asking for help is sometimes really, really frightening. And that's the shame on society. We've made it a stigma, and therefore we've made it difficult to ask for help. But there is no shame, and it affects people of every background, every background, every age, every educational level, every financial level, every faith level, every spiritual level. Ask for help. It's okay to ask for help.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Kevin. And yeah, please do remember the links that we've got on this video, which are just some of the places that you can go to for that help. So please, if you yeah, if you feel that you need that support, then take that step to seek the help. Emily, I wonder if you have anything to add about that. So it was, what should we do when food unrest are not enough?
I think it can be very different for each person what is enough. So I know that for me and a couple of friends, when rest and food isn't enough, getting out the house and seeing people is the next step. Sort of escaping your own prison, as it were. Sort of, I found that I stay in my room, I don't really leave my room, but then I get a text from a friend and it's like, hey, let's go do this thing, or can I come sit in your garden with you? And it's like, yeah, that'd be great actually. And I sort of did that last week. A friend came, we sat in my garden, we had a fire, we had s'mores, and for both of us it was really beneficial just seeing other people, especially at a time like this when a lot of people are in isolation. So yeah, I'd say, Kevin, I completely agree. It's sort of asking for help, but also sometimes just talking to someone about anything can help mentally. So I just send jokes to my friends and I get a little laughing emoji, and sometimes that's enough for me. It's like, yes, I've made someone else smile. That's kind of helped me a bit as well. Sort of helping others helps me, I find.
Okay, thanks, Emily.
I would really emphasize, and I mean, this isn't necessary for everyone, but for some people, you might need to speak to a doctor, and that's okay. And some people need to take medication, and that's okay. I think sometimes there's still the stigma around that, and unwillingness to talk about that. But it can be, and it's never. It's not a crutch. It's just something that will help you get to a level, where you can begin to take those other steps towards healing and recovery. And it can be it can be really good. And I think I would also emphasize, for those of you, anyone listening who's kind of quite young, you're never too young to have like mental health problems. Sometimes people will say it's like teenage hormones or just kind of ordinary when you're 15 or 16 or whatever, but that and being a teenager is a really turbulent time, we all know that, but that doesn't mean that you have to kind of put up with poor mental health. So I think really, like, speak out, seek help, don't be afraid to seek treatment, and don't be ashamed. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We've had another question coming in, which is related about how the help and support that can be provided. So one of our viewers has asked, what can the church do more to help those with a mental illness? So yeah, how is the church, can we help? Emily, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, one thing that the Wessex SYE actually did recently is, at one of our meetings, we have two of them a year as an open meeting for any young people that are sort of assembly age can come along, and we sometimes, hopefully all the time now, we like to provide some sort of training. And the last one that we had in person, we offered mental health first aid training. We had, I feel really bad, I can't remember his name. He's done a lot for the URC with mental health. But yeah, he came in and spoke to us, answered all of our questions. So that's one thing I would say that we have done, is we've offered training and facilitated those spaces to allow people to talk and share ideas and experiences safely and confidently.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Emily. Anyone else have any thoughts about that? How can the church help those?
I think the URC is a broad church, but actually is increasingly becoming a more and more inclusive church. And actually we need all of us to encourage our churches to be inclusive about inviting everybody and saying this is a safe place to say how you are, what's going on, and that old tradition of wear your Sunday best. We don't have to follow that tradition anymore. And if you're having a hard time, come to your church community and have a hard time with them. Don't sit at home and have a hard time. It might not magic it away. You may, but you know what? It's better to have a hard time with other people around you than on your own. And don't feel that you've got to put up your a persona to come to church. And I think the more we give that message out in subtle ways, not just about mental health, but about everything, then the URC is going to be such an exciting and vibrant place to be. So actually we need people who share that vision to kind of embody it really, and bit by bit make our churches as open as they could be.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
I think, yeah, as well. I mean, I'm not in the URC, so I'm in the Anglican Church, but I think broadly, sort of similar, lessons apply. I think we're learning as well. We're getting better, but I think what I would like to see is people really kind of leading from the front. Priests and ministers sort of talking about these things, and people kind of be using and be given access to some of the kind of language around mental health. And not that all of our struggles are mental health, but I think that when they are, it's really important to have access to those words in order to explain what's going on. And for people that are struggling, maybe when they hear those words for the first time, they begin to really understand what's going on for them. And I think just kind of normalizing it as part of the conversation makes it easier and better for everybody.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thanks, Liz. I think there's been some really important things going back early when we're saying about help, and knowing that when we'd said the people that in our churches, in our communities are able to help us, and just because we're in lockdown at the moment, if we're not able to meet face to face, the church is still there in the community. Or finding out, going back to the earlier question, who are those angels, the people that can help us? That could be somebody at work, it could be somebody at university, could be a friend, but finding those people that you can speak to and accessing support where needed as well. Okay. Thank you everyone who sent in questions. We're coming towards the end of our episode this evening, but we have another question that was sent out before our episode that I would like to invite our panelists to share as well. So this is about, where do you see the church modelling or reflecting the teaching or examples of this passage? So are there any stories, things that you would like to share that you see the church modelling that? Liz, I'd like to invite you to share first.
Cool. So, I think one of the really great things about the church is that we can welcome people as their whole selves. They're not just coming in to kind of see us as professionals. They're not just a mental health service user or a patient or whatever, but they're a person. And I think I've seen within my own church context, people who do have kind of quite significant mental health needs sometimes. One of the really beautiful things that we can do for them is just see them as who they are, as a complex person who has some difficulties, but also, and also, I don't like to use the word "but" here, and also has some really, really wonderful qualities, and these things all kind of coexist. And I think there's something really unique about the way that church can do that, and about the way that we can value kind of human dignity and human worth in that way. And I think that allows us to really attend to individual needs in that kind of same really gentle, caring way that the angel attended to Elijah. So that's where I would say that the church can, at its best, do really well with mental health.
Okay, thanks, Liz. And Kevin, do you have any examples to share?
I kind of guess I would actually echo all that, but basically, we the church as always strives to be the hands and feet of Christ, and when we are contributing to food banks, when we are contributing to homeless projects, when we are providing food for the community, we are living out the passage, but also just being somewhere where it's safe to bring our faith and our doubts, our hopes and our fears, and to talk to others about discerning what may or may not be God, in an unconditional way, in a non-judgmental way. I think we're living out the passage when we can do that.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. And Emily?
I think just the sense of community that children have. One thing that I never really used to understand as a young child, but totally get now as an adult, is the role of the welcomer at church. So at our church, you enter sort of through the side and then up the middle, and there's always someone stood at the end next to the door that used to, not at the moment, that would shake your hand. Hi, welcome. Please have a seat anywhere. I think that is really important, just inviting people in as they are, whoever they are, and just, inviting them to be a part of our community. And they don't have to stay if they don't want to, but it's reassuring them that we're here. And we always say at the beginning of the service, if there are any visitors today, please join us for coffee in the hall. Like we make it aware that there is a place that we can all talk together about anything and everything. And I think that's my favorite thing about the church, is just the sense of community and coming as you are and being able to trust this group of people with anything and everything, and trusting them to help you in any means that they can, or to point you in the right direction.
Okay, great. Thanks, Emily. So that brings us to the end of this evening's discussion in this episode, but we hope that the conversations will carry on, that you will use this as a launchpad to continue discussing this topic and what it means to you. Was there anything else from the passage that you took? Maybe you took something else that the panel this evening didn't discuss. Maybe there's questions. How can you continue having these discussions about mental health to help break down the stigma around mental health? As we'd said, URC, you've had signed the Time to Change pledge to tackle the stigma around mental illness. And we, URC Youth, some members of URC Youth had produced a resource called Get Talking, which is about starting conversations about mental wellbeing. So it's a discussion resource which you can be used to start having those conversations in your communities, with your friends, in your church. So again, that link is in the YouTube video as well. If you go into the information below the video, you can access that on the URC's website. Do take a look. And also there's a link to Time to Change, where you can learn more about that pledge and its work that Time to Change do to tackle the stigma around mental health. And again, as a reminder, we've been discussing mental health and well-being, that if you or someone you know is experiencing poor mental health, then remember that support is available, and to reach out for that support. And we have those links there again below the video of where you can access support if needed. So thank you for the panelists, and thank you for the viewers who joined as well tonight. Next week will be another episode of Trialogue. We are going to be looking at the theme of legacies of slavery next week, looking at the passage of Philemon. So your host will be Ruth White from Wessex Synod, and the three panelists will be Patricia Okoli, Alan Yates and Zadie Orr. So do join us again next week for that discussion on legacies of slavery. So we are now going to end our evening with a short time of prayer. Dear Lord, we give thanks for our conversations this evening as we've explored the important topic of mental health and well-being. We give thanks that you offer us the angels in our lives, the people that are there to be able to help and support us in our times of need, and that we have our coping strategies that help us to have good mental health. We pray that these conversations this evening will be a springboard to more conversations, and that we will help to tackle the stigma around mental health, and that in our churches that we can continue these conversations and think about how, as a church, we can support those in need. Amen. Okay, thank you everybody, and please do tune in again next week for Trialogue.